Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Gambeto Gaming and we're taking a look back at the cut and unused content Iceberg over on icebergcharts.com, looking at the next layer of the iceberg today. I am planning to tackle the rest of this iceberg one layer per video, which may be disappointing for those of you who like the longer videos, but this is just to be able to get more parts out more efficiently. That is not once a quarter like it is right now. Also, a small note about part 1, there was some misinformation in that episode with a few of the entries, which I intend to fix if I do a compilation of all the parts at the end, but apologies, it's never my intention to spread misinformation about video games, much less about the cut content within. That'd just be a weird thing to try and achieve through a YouTube channel, but nevertheless, the size of these projects I take on come with a certain amount of work on all fronts, including the research, which is without a doubt my weakest part of video creation. With these mistakes, I take it on the chin and I intend to learn from them to continue to produce entertaining but also informative videos that are actually factually backed up. So please continue to let me know if I get information wrong in these entries and videos, and take a moment to accept that I am a human being and not some robot AI, so mistakes will be made. And if it's respectful, I will always take criticism seriously and learn from it. This is also another reason why I wanted to keep these videos at a layer, so I can give the necessary time to each entry to get you guys the most relevant and correct information for each. Anyway, yap sesh out of the way. Without further ado, let's hop back into some classified files from the depths of Miyamoto's darkest hard drives. The first entry of the day brings us to the world of 2D Minecraft, otherwise known as Terraria. Or that's what I would say if I hadn't sunk hundreds of hours into the game and realized it's much more than that. Stuff like the amount of bosses, tools, and character variants are all reasons to sink hundreds of hours into the game. Then you graduate to modding the game and the finish line just straight up disappears from view. With all of this content, there is of course going to be some cut content that didn't make it into the game, with one of the biggest interests from fans being the cut tools and weapons. The main set of tools have variants much like the different tiers to the Minecraft tools, but with way more. A set of tools known as the Celestial tool set were cut from the game and replaced with the ham axe in terms of gameplay changes, but the original sprites for these items and the items themselves are not present in the game without mods adding them back in. And the specific Celestial ham axe ended up replacing the need for all of these different Celestial variations, thus removing their cool designs and making them pretty much obsolete. I mean, when there are fully dedicated mod packs that completely change the game, looking back on cut base weapons seems like child's play, but players who prefer vanilla Terraria, this is definitely unfortunate not to make it into the game, even as just a visual variation while still having stuff like the ham axe in the game as well. While we're in the world of Terraria, let's take a look at things that were at one time present in the game but were subsequently removed. Specifically, there were a few weapons that have been removed from the game for a number of reasons. For example, the Ice Morn, named and inspired by the Frost Morn from World of Warcraft, was likely removed in fear of copyright from good old Blizzard. It's a Blizzard when they come around. In a similar vein, the Scythe and the Soul Scythe were supposedly removed for being too similar to the material that inspired them, this time being the anime Soul Eater. Lastly, we could see the riskiest of these cut weapons, this time being the Zappinator, a clear reference to the NES Zapper by Nintendo. The Zappinator was originally added as a dev tool to help them while testing things, having an easy way to kill enemies, as the Zappinator had a high fire rate and basically one-shot most of the basic enemies. For a while, this was the most powerful weapon in the game before it was removed in the 1.0.1 update for the game. The Zappinator, although not in its fullest dev god mode form, was brought back into two variations, a standard gray variation and the one that is more clearly resembling the original Zappinator. The Zappinator can also be found, also not in its super maxed out dev mode, in the 3DS version of the game, where it can be dropped by one of the bosses. While it's not as powerful as the original dev version of the Zappinator, it's actually a pretty good early game weapon, but you'll really want to use the orange one, trust me on that one. Clearly the developers of Terraria are fans of other video games and typical nerdy shit, so to see the potential of these weapons makes it sting even more that you can't use them in the actual game. But honestly, I think my biggest takeaway from this entry is that Terraria was on the fucking 3DS? What the hell? I think I'd rather play it on a fucking Tiger Electronic, to be honest. With Mario Kart World coming out in a month or so, the Mario Kart hype is real, at least for me. And it looks like Nintendo is thinking outside the box again for the series. Don't get me wrong, Mario Kart 8 is great as the best traditional Mario Kart you could probably find on the market. But it was still missing a bunch that made the previous games pretty great. One of these things, and the reason Mario Kart DS is still worth playing even today, is the mission mode that the game presented. These were single-player missions that ended up changing the gameplay loop for the better, man. They were super engaging missions that help you practice core things that you can take into the actual races. Stuff like drifting, using items, knowing when to use items, stuff like that. With the release of Mario Kart Wii, many were expecting this mission mode to carry over, but as we all know, Mario Kart Wii played it pretty safe. This wasn't always the case, as we could see a lot in terms of remnants of a scrap mission mode for Mario Kart Wii. Thanks to back-end splunkers like Mr. Bean 35,000 VR. On YouTube, we could see what this mode would have looked like in their earliest forms. These cut missions inspired by the DS missions are mostly the same, with you needing to complete a certain number of drifts and so on. There's a few unique to the Wii, like the mission where you gain points based on how long you can wheelie, which is pretty cool but is clearly unfinished, as the points go mayhem anytime you even lean back on your bike a little bit. Unfortunately, due to either time constraints or something else entirely, this mode was scrapped with a less than faithful tournament mode added that would change the gameplay, like reversing courses and some other small gameplay tweaks, but nothing on the level of mission mode. There's even some fully finished stages that are so clearly meant for this mode, like the Galaxy Coliseum, where it was clear this was meant for a boss battle mission, which were some of my favorite in the DS version. It seems like Mario Kart World is going in a better direction for the variation on the main gameplay of Mario Kart, and dedicating a full single-player campaign is nice, but man, nothing beats the uniqueness of these old-school DS missions. I really hope they bring these back one day. The amount of stuff we'll come to find that was cut from Battle for Bikini Bottom is pretty much criminal at this point, as there was a lot left on the chopping block for this cult classic. The infamous dream sequence from the game that had SpongeBob traversing through the different main characters' dreams strangely has Patrick's missing, or at least missing the level that should have come with this sequence. Instead of getting a dedicated dream level for Patrick, the developers instead added in this dark, empty room to simulate the emptiness of Patrick's mind. He's so dumb he doesn't dream type beat, you know what I'm saying? However, this joke of sorts may have been a safety net, as there is evidence in the game's files that Patrick had a platforming stage attached to his dream. Through reconstructing the game files, modders have been able to bring the level back into the game in mostly a full state, with all but the skybox being mostly finished. Man, it's shit like this that makes me appreciate a regular old skybox, non-glitched out, holy shit. The level is made up of suites and sees players hopping on things like ice cream cone platforms. Ha ha ha, get it? He's a fat ass, right? The concept art for the level also shows a similar suite-themed course, and they seem to have nailed it with what's shown here. Too bad they were unable to bring it into the full game, but I've seen worse placeholders for cut content than this in the past, so. The real stab in the back is they didn't even try to bring this level back in the rehydrated remake, and instead made multiplayer maps that slightly reference this cut stage, in really cementing how much that game sucks as a quote-unquote remake. Another piece of cut content from SpongeBob Advanced Warfare was actually another level that unfortunately didn't make it super far in development. Glove World from some of the most popular SpongeBob episodes was at some point planned to be playable level in the game, as we could see evidence mainly being this piece of concept art. There are also leftover assets that probably would have appeared in the stage present in other stages like Goo Lagoon in the final game. Based on the concept art, this actually looks like it would have been a really cool level, maybe even featuring a part where SpongeBob would climb the main roller coaster itself to get a golden spatula. Spatula, give me the formioli, bruh. We can also see what looks like to be a part of Goo Lagoon here, so this was likely a decision to combine both levels, which is why we could see some amusement park attractions appear at Goo Lagoon. I think in an effort to cut the fat and not have levels feel repetitive, this was probably a good decision for the final game, but I can't lie that amusement park levels and games go so hard, especially when a lot of the objectives are tied to the actual rides themselves, as it appears this would have been the case here. Regardless, Glove World does show up in other SpongeBob games, so I guess at least there's that, right? And in true disappointing fashion, Glove World was also not brought back to the rehydrated remake. But hey, the shitty multiplayer mode still exists though, right guys? The earliest concept images for the first Super Mario Bros. On NES shows a much different game than the iconic industry-changing giant the final release was. For starters, the main gameplay focus on platforming was originally much more of a side-scroller shooter type of game. Not only this, but iconic Mario character Yoshi was originally planned to be in the first Mario game, with the main piece of evidence being what may very well be the first draft ever of our homeboy Yoshi. The concept image features a couple of ideas for Yoshi, with one being the obvious pick for Yoshi's final design, where he was finally realized in Super Mario World. The other design is strange given his final design, but I find it endearing with how pterodactyl-like his face is, mixed with these short little stubby legs. Like, what the hell were they thinking? Miyamoto wanted to include Yoshi in the earliest of Mario's adventures, but due to the system limitations that the NES presented, this idea would have to be cut from the game, but luckily our main man moved it back to the back burner like a pot of beans. He started a little too early. He was just holding Yoshi back there on low heat. With how simple Super Mario Bros. Was and is, especially in terms of Mario games now, I think it's a good thing things worked out with Yoshi how they did. If he were included in this, he'd likely be seen as just an item rather than his introduction in Super Mario World, where they were able to build out a deeper little backstory for him and cement him as a unique character in the Mario universe. Super Mario Sunshine has a lot of stuff that didn't make it into the final version, and considering I've done a full Iceberg just on Super Mario Sunshine content, this game was hella ambitious. In terms of the more popular cut content from the game, the stuff we'll be tackling today, a lot of this can be seen in the original Space World 2001 trailer for the game. One of the most notable absences from that gameplay demo to the final release is the missing enemy known as HinoKuri. The HinoKuri is a large goop enemy that is unique not only in design, but it's with its moveset as well. From the Space World demo footage, we can actually see that this enemy would tower over Mario. He's like 10 or 15 Marios high, and chase them around the hub world. While the final Delfino Plaza isn't 100% without enemies, there isn't any huge threats like this just running around terrorizing the plaza. The HinoKuri not only charges and chases Mario, but works as a spawner for the smaller Strollin' Stews, which are present in the final game. Considering there are spawners for these enemies in the final game, it's likely HinoKuri was no longer needed, as besides a spawner, he was more of a nuisance enemy, as you would have to get height on him to take him down. There are actually files in the game that suggest there were two versions of this HinoKuri enemy, with the original HinoKuri PRM files suggesting that it may have been a boss at some point. This is backed up further by a cut mask item that can be found in the game's files as well, that would have belonged to one of these HinoKuri versions. With it appearing, Mario would need to crack his mask before being able to further attack the enemy as per usual. This could have been a harder version of the HinoKuri that would have either been a boss itself or would have showed up as a harder version of the HinoKuri later in the game. While HinoKuri does look like it fits with the strange enemy designs that Sunshine introduced, it makes sense as to why it was cut, being that the original Delfino Plaza changed so much, likely leading to them not really having a place to put the HinoKuri, leading to him being cut from the game. Or it could be the fact that, you see this guy's anus when he's spawning the enemies. Quick tangent that is semi-related to this entry. I feel like if you're not a mainline Mario character, i.e. an enemy that showed up in any number of Mario's adventures, right, there is no rhyme or reason for your presence in modern Mario games. Just another Mario Party or Mario Kart comes out and you're like, oh look, it's the snow cone guy from Super Mario Bros. 2, cool to see you, but honestly I forgot you existed. I think they still make really great original enemies today, but to see them constantly recycle these classic enemies with really no purpose, like Piranha is Mario Kart 8. How have I spent more time racing the guy than fighting him when he originated as a boss battle? I don't know, I just feel like some of these comeback enemies should be re-implemented, but in a way that's more fitting than just to fill a fucking roster. Perhaps this is due to things like this next entry, where they have attempted to bring classic enemies from the old school platformers into the new age, but failed, like with Blargg from Super Mario World almost making its way into Super Mario 64. In the game's files, a half-finished model of Blargg can be found with a similar design to the Blargg in Super Mario World, but in a 3D space this time, obviously. It's not a fully modeled face or anything, but at least they got his big-ass, goofy-ass teeth in there, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't until recent leaks that Blargg's moveset was obtained, and this showed that Blargg was indeed an enemy and would attack Mario when he was within 600 in-game units of the Blargg. Listen, we all know how much cooler Mario 64 would have been if all the stuff Miyamoto originally wanted actually happened, right? And I'm adding this one to the list. This would have been a really cool enemy to dodge when shell surfing in Lethal Lava Land, or as maybe a way to traverse the lava by bouncing on their heads. Who knows what their fullest potential in the game would have been, but Blargg has been added back into the game through ROM hacks, and this is the best representation of what he'd look like given the files that were left in the game. The stuff we know about. I'm all for Nintendo to keep making creative, unique enemies, but if you're bringing back enemies, let's do this like they did with Super Mario 3D World, where they brought back Charge and Chucks seamlessly, with him having a full resurrection of sorts, outside of just being a really annoying enemy in Super Mario World. Now he's just a really annoying enemy in Champions Road. Once again, we gain knowledge of a game's early state from early concept art, specifically from an art book this time. Yeah, these things are more than just bathroom material for when your phone dies, apparently. I didn't know that. The Super Mario Odyssey art book reveals a lot of early concept art for the game, even one that reveals that fan favorite Rosalina from Super Mario Galaxy may have appeared in Mario Odyssey at some point. The concept art also reveals a very different Rosalina from what we know her to be, in much more casual wear and playing a guitar. At first glance, this may just seem like a doodle of her, almost fan art of Rosalina that got scrapped early, but the guitar may actually reveal more about her potential role in the final game. As we know, Pauline is putting together a band when Mario arrives in New Donk City, so it's possible that instead of gathering a group of random New Donk residents, you would have been assembling a group of familiar Mario characters, including Rosalina, on a little acoustic guitar. Either this, or Rosalina was originally meant to replace Pauline entirely until they settled on Pauline due to the classic Donkey Kong theme of the level. If the former were to be believed, there are theories that the entire band would have been made up of princesses, with many assuming Daisy would have been on drums in that scenario. I could see it. This is definitely the most fitting place in the game for Rosalina based on the sole concept art that we were provided, but I think this would have been really cool to see all of the princesses in one place. One that's not just on a racetrack or a party board, not to bring that back up again, but they probably ran out of time with this and just made the default ass band that's in the final game, but who knows, it might have taken away from Pauline's spotlight. So what do you guys think? I almost think Rosalina would have been cool to see in the moon level, since she lives out there. But now I'm just spitballing. I'm bullshitting. Hopefully we'll get a Mario Odyssey 2 sometime in the next 3 centuries, and we'll finally see Rosalina make her way into the Odyssey universe. Once again, we are brought back to the early versions of Minecraft before there was a Minecraft movie and nether dipping sauce at McDonald's, a time I don't want to go back to. In early versions of Minecraft, before they committed to using redstone for more mechanical aspects of Minecraft, Notch introduced a gear item. These would be used to connect power to different sources and would have been placeable on blocks in a thin layer, similar to how vines lay on blocks. These gears would turn like real gears, and the more that are connected, the further the power can be pushed. These were introduced in the earliest version of Minecraft, known as NDev, and was added in the 0.31 update. They stayed in the game until the alpha launched, and in version 1.0.1, the gears were removed, and old worlds that had gears were then replaced with redstone wire, as the data for the gears was completely replaced with the redstone wire, all the way down to replacing the data values. You go to sleep one day, you had gears, the next, you got a line of redstone. It's weird. This is the clear reason as to why the gears were removed, as they were replaced with the redstone wire, which is not only likely way easier to make and lay down, but visually it's a lot less busy versus early images of gears being added to a wall, making a simple farm look like the innards of Big Ben. Aesthetically, I do like the gears, and I wouldn't mind them being brought back as maybe a decoration piece. Instead of these actually providing the power, these could be placed outside of these redstone machines to make it look, I don't know, more industrial or some shit. I don't know, though. I think the actual gears from Gears of War have a better chance of being added into Minecraft than these things added back in again. A Hat in Time obviously took a lot of inspiration from the N64 era of platformers, like the gameplay style of Super Mario 64, the collectibles of Banjo and Kazooie, and some elements of Ocarina of Time, which there would have been a lot more influence from the last game based on early footage and what developers stated early in development. At one point in time, the developers were playing around with the idea of time travel and having Hat Kid have a future separate timeline version of herself known as Hat Adult. This is clear inspiration from Ocarina of Time's Kid Link and Adult Link time travel concept. Hat Adult was seen in early beta footage where she can be seen walking out of a coffee shop, and since then this footage has been made playable and will be the footage used in the video here. Developers stated in an interview with Zelda Universe in 2014 that, very similar to Ocarina of Time, Hat Kid's adult counterpart will play a significant role. We haven't quite spilled the beans on this aspect quite yet, but we hope to be able to showcase it very soon. Obviously, this idea would be scrapped not long after this, and this was likely due in part to Hat Adult being harder to implement than originally thought. It's also due to negative feedback during playtesting where testers found the adult segments clunky and just wanted to go back to playing as Hat Kid. Overall, I think this served better for the game for being cut, more so than most of the other cut content in this Iceberg anyway. And the footage of Hat Adult walking around, a comment was made that I think brings up some great points as to why Hat Adult would have made the game a little bit weaker. The biggest takeaway I had from this comment was I think it's just better on a character level for Hat Kid to remain the enigma that she is, rebellious, mischievous, childish, and unconcerned with maturity, and at the same time inexplicably competent, perceptive, and astute. Seeing her age up like this is just kind of strips away all of her mystery, like, oh yeah, Hat Kid's just a regular civilian girl with no family or family legacy who just grows up to be a regular boring civilian woman. While I do like the reference to such a great element of Ocarina of Time, like this comment states, it's not worth the character assassination it would have had on Hat Kid, I think. Baldi's Basics takes the indie horror game trope of seeming like a basic educational indie game, but then does a 180 and becomes one of the most popular indie horror games online. One of the main mechanics is to solve questions inside classrooms, with this being the way the game starts, with pretty simple questions until it gets to an unsolvable one, making Baldi upset and causing him to begin chasing the player. From here, you need to collect all 7 notebooks before being allowed to escape, in a way. To retrieve the notebooks, you'll need to answer more math questions, which each one you get wrong causes Baldi to move faster while chasing you. Originally, the developer thought to add way more subjects to the game rather than just simple math questions, with spelling, history, science, geography, geology, and English being some of the contenders. Instead, just math exists in the game, and this is because of a few reasons based on what the developer has stated in live streams and separate Q&As. The developer has stated that they wanted to keep the questions in the game more logic-based and focus less on subjects that large parts of the world likely wouldn't know, like English or American history. So to make the game more accessible, the developers strived to add only logic-based questions, with a large majority of these being, well, math questions, cementing math as the best subject to go with, and why it's really the only subject in the final game. So yeah, like the dev stated, it's not a huge focus of the game as it's masking as a horror game, so it's not a huge deal that all the subjects are just logic or math questions. And given that Baldi's Basic Plus has already launched and been out, we know that there is still only math as a subject. However, there were some minigames and other puzzles to collect notebooks, so it seems like there was some remnants, maybe, of the other subjects coming through there. But who knows, this game is still early access, so all of this could change someday, and I'm talking irrelevancy right now. Speaking of cut content from Baldi's Basics, there are quite a few cut voice lines, with this entry highlighting the Principal and Playtime's cut voice lines. Playtime is the small kid that forces you to jump rope in the hallway, acting as a way to keep the player immobile for Baldi to gain on them. Overall, a pretty terrifying game aspect given what's going on here. In Baldi's Basics, she will force the player to jump rope 5 successful times before she leaves you alone. However, this cut voice line reveals that at one point she would force the player to jump 10 times instead.
Jump rope 10 times in a row. Once you do, I let you go.
It's also a much more long-winded explanation for what's all of a sudden happening versus the final version, where she kind of just throws you into the minigame, making the panic of it even more extreme.
Let's play. Ready? Go!
The eerie-ass voice line would go unused until the classic remastered version came out, where in the hard mode she'd appear with this voice line and the new task of quickly doing 10 jumps in a row. Not only does Playtime have her share of cut voice lines, but the Principal also has a few cut voice lines that were once present in the game but are no longer. One of the voice lines was connected to another cut element known as the Pencil Boy, who would stab the player with the pencil, with the Principal's lines being the following.
No stabbing people with pencils in the halls.
The principal has other smaller lines that are considered cut, like the line where he states, "No hiding in lockers in the hall." This one is not present in the classic remastered since that game doesn't feature those gameplay mechanics. But overall, Baldi's Basics had a lot of cut content and even more variations of the game, so I doubt this will be the last time we're tackling Baldi in this Iceberg. So let's go ahead and move on. Much like other entries in the Super Smash Bros. Series, the latest, Ultimate, was no exception to having some cut content. While there isn't as much excitement behind the characters that were cut last minute like Wario with Super Smash Bros. Melee, Ultimate's cut content is still intriguing as to see how different certain characters could be, not only visually but also mechanically. Take Piranha Plant for example, which is a unique character in of himself, being the only free DLC character for Smash Ultimate, but at one time he was once a bit more powerful than he is in the final game. Right up until a patch went out a day before the game's launch, this guy would have had an extra third jump to his repertoire. I don't know if at my level of Smash Bros. If this would have made a huge difference, but professional PP players are probably salivating right now. That was wild to say. What the fuck? We can still find the animation for the third jump in the game, which looks pretty pathetic all things considered. So I doubt this would have been a huge jump or anything, maybe just a second chance before using his up B to recover. Again, with how much vertical mobility Piranha Plant already has compared to other characters and probably compared to other Piranha Plants in the Mario universe, this third jump likely gave him too much of an advantage in the air. Considering he's a potted plant, chances are this was a good call, seeing if these things are airborne in real life, it's usually being knocked over by my asshole cat. Piranha Plant wasn't the only thing that changed from beta to final release, as a lot of the final characters in the game had palette swap differences. Take for example the race change for Villager and Pokemon Trainer to make the game more inclusive, or the two changed skins for Ridley that would have referenced other appearances in the Metroid series respectively, instead of the Mecha Ridley variants we got. The Ice Climbers are swapped position-wise for certain costumes in the final game, while in the beta they were the same like previous Smash Bros. Games throughout all of their costumes. Other than this, before the final release, Sonic strangely only had alternate costumes that consisted of different shades of blue, rather than the different colors referencing other Sonic characters like in the final game. All in all, these changes are very minute, but still worth mentioning, as a part of what makes Smash Ultimate great is the attention to small details, and these changes only add up to the overall charm of Ultimate. As I've discussed on the channel before, the Sonic the Hedgehog series has a lot of cut content and looked very different in the beginning than what the franchise is today. As we looked at in the last video, the beta, the original Sonic the Hedgehog, reveals a lot more about the game, but today's focus is one of the many item boxes that were cut from the final game. One of these item boxes shows a pair of goggles that appears to be obtainable and wearable by Sonic. However, it was confirmed by developers that this was going to be used just as a destructible warning sign with no additional gameplay features attributed to it. With this, it was still believed the original purpose of the goggles was to provide Sonic with an extra chance upon drowning or some sort of extra air in water sections. The goggles were once again brought back to the 2013 remastered version of the first game, where it went once again unused but could actually be obtained from the debug menu this time. This pair of debug goggles didn't do anything gameplay wise and are just visually present, but overall, given the pressure and anxiety the water sections provide the players, something like this would be nice, but it could also ruin this panic and make the water sections a little too easy, or definitely less memorable. The idea of the game is to go fast, and something about doing this underwater shouldn't work, but it does, and the addition of an item like the goggles would make it to where you don't need to go particularly fast, just a little bit. Kind of going against the whole idea of Sonic the Hedgehog, so I could see why this went unused. Usable doors in video games are popular in terms of cut content, as it's not only a common occurrence, but the mere idea of a door in a video game makes you want to go through it. Sure, a lot of games use doors as decorations for a building that you can't use, but when a door stands out, you better believe some people are going to want to see the other side. This is the case with one of Bloodborne's more popular mysteries, being the door that resides behind the first boss, the Cleric Beast. Now, the Cleric Beast is the first big boss you'll go against, so you'll come across this door pretty early on in the game, and with Bloodborne being a Souls game, you should expect levels that connect through shortcuts. Bloodborne does a great job of creating challenging runs to your next checkpoint, point, and while the shortcuts are sparse, it makes them all the more rewarding when you do find one. So naturally, when you run across this door behind the Cleric beast, you would assume it was a nice little shortcut that could probably be unlocked later on in the game. Either this or a potential dialogue with an NPC on the other side, or even a side mission given this is present in other parts of the game. If you do no-clip through the door through modding the game, you'll find a small path that just goes nowhere, clips out into the void. Thanks to Lance McDonald's footage over on YouTube, we can also find a lever floating close to the large gate that is near the door. You can actually activate this switch, but it does nothing. Of course it does nothing. Perhaps this was a way to open the door, but it was likely instead used for a gate, as you usually just open the doors in the game. You don't have to find a lever. You can actually find the room that this door would connect to in the game. It's the one underneath the cathedral ward with all the pots and the strange chest right next to a door that looks like it's blocking it. This door would have connected the two locations, with further proof coming from the fact that this room's name in the game files is former shortcut room, and the evidence of the awkward placement of the chest at the end of the hall, giving a reason for the room to exist without cutting too much of the actual evidence out. Lance also found out that if you exit the game in this room and reload the game, you'll find that exiting back towards the cathedral ward, you'll get a title card for the new area, further suggesting that this would play if the player used this shortcut. Modders have been able to fully place the shortcut back into the game, and it actually works pretty well, bringing into question why they removed the shortcut in the first place. It's likely concerns over pacing, as I don't know when there would have been a good time to unlock the shortcut, certainly not right after the Cleric beast fight, so perhaps this was the issue they ran into and decided to scrap it. Given the mysterious nature of unused doors in games, this one is pretty tame and makes sense as the game uses these doors often for shortcuts. You know, the other side of this door could have so easily been, you know, an out-of-bounds secret of Miyazaki doing the default dance or some shit. Once again, the Super Mario Odyssey art book is coming in clutch to see what once had a chance of being in the final Odyssey game. Considering we will never get a second one, I gotta hold on to this shit, man. This is important to me. This time we got a lot of alternate costumes for Mario to collect on his adventure. While there are a lot of costumes in the final game, there were a lot that didn't make the cut as well, and others who changed a lot during the development process, so let's take a look at a few. Since there are so many, I'll just point out a few of my favorites that I wish could have made it into the game. But here, if you'd like to see all of the photos in full, you can find them by following the Twitter link in the description below, or there you go, they're on the screen. Maybe zoom in, control, scroll, you know? Is that it? Control scroll, I think. As we know, there are a lot of costumes and just general secrets in the game that reference older Mario titles, and there are many more costumes like this planned for the game, of which some of the best are things like the virus costume from Dr. Mario, where Mario would represent the red virus but looks more like a strange devil cosplay. There's a costume of one of the pixie princesses from 3D World, making Mario look like a sage from Ocarina of Time or some shit, more than a cute little princess. Jesus Christ, this is terrifying. Showcasing a few of the other random costumes, we got Roadhog Mario, that Tim Allen movie, Maid Mario, like that one SpongeBob episode, Muscle Man Mario, like that other SpongeBob episode, and USSR Mario, like that real life thing that happened. We even have Mario dressing up as his friends like Toadette Mario, Toad Mario, and even the goofiest one in my opinion, Luma Mario, where it looks like he has one of those blow-up air suits, and now I really want this shit to be in the game. In fact, all of these costumes would have went really hard, and given the reason a lot of these didn't make it into the game was due to the costumes not fitting the progression of the game, which I do get for like the world-themed outfits you buy with the purple coins in the game, but tell me how these costumes all helped story progression. Yeah, it seems like a lot of these things didn't make it past the concept art phase, but it's still cool to see all of these even in this form, and gives them a lot to work off of if, you know, if we do ever get a Super Mario Odyssey 2. I know I'm talking about it a lot, but, you know, at this rate, the new voice of Mario is going to retire by the time that game comes out, so I'm just, you know, I gotta hold on to anything I get for Odyssey stuff, man. In the early development and concept phase surrounding Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, we got concept art of a potential new legendary looking Pokemon. This Pokemon would come to be known as Latiken due to its similarities to both Latias and Blaziken, almost as if they were mashed up into one character. The only evidence of Latiken comes from this small concept art piece that shows the creature with its trainer that turns out to be May riding on its back, with this being the similarities to Latias, while visually it resembles more Blaziken. It wouldn't be until the Giga Leak of 2024 that an actual sprite and proof that this Pokemon was worked on further than concept stages would be found in the files within Ruby and Sapphire. The sprite resembles the concept art honestly to a key, and is exactly what you'd picture this looking like inside the art style of Ruby and Sapphire. Technically, this is just an early version of Blaziken, as the remnants of this got turned into the actual Blaziken we know today, and all things considered, he kind of just got on that bipedal tip and leaned up on his legs a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Latiken would still be a dope Pokemon, as the Latias and Latios, while cool in their own right, are a little bit bland in my opinion, and having a fire version of them would be dope as hell. Yoshi's story features a unique Yoshi adventure where, like Island, you'll take control of many different color Yoshis. These act as your lives in the game, with 6 in total for the entire game. Sure, you can recover lives, but these are your crew, man, and shit, do they look reliable as hell. In the early days of internet rumors and urban legends, Yoshi's story was hit with a rumor that there were 2 extra unlockable Yoshi colors to find in the game, with a lot of websites claiming you needed to collect every coin in the game to see a new purple Yoshi variant. Of course, these would end up either being old school trolling or misinformation passed along, but the origin of this rumor doesn't come out of nowhere, and is why this was technically cut content. During the beta phase, a screenshot can be seen where 2 more colors are present, with the purple replacing the pink and brown replacing the white Yoshi in the final game. Not only did this probably start the rumor outright, but the rumor was further fueled by the main title screen and the lighting on the storybook, making the pink Yoshi look more purple than pink. All of this was enough for people to hunt for these variant Yoshis, but unfortunately, unless a beta build leaks fully one day, we'll have to stick with the basic Crayola box of Yoshi colors for now. Red Dead Redemption 2 is known to have its fair share of mystical shit in the game, stuff you wouldn't expect from a game trying to achieve this level of realism. In the early stages of Red Dead Redemption 2, it seems like they had planned for at least one more stranger mission that is supposedly based on the Loch Ness from real-life folklore. This creature is known as the River Monster, and at first it may seem that this monster may have been simply a cut legendary animal, like the other ones in the game, but given what's revealed in the game files, it's actually more likely a scrapped stranger mission. Similar to when players needed to retrieve this guy's lion, and the big twist was it was actually a lion that Arthur, or John, needs to take down. Once killed, the animal can't be skinned, but it can be looted once you retrieve a unique lion paw item. Similarly, the river monster couldn't be skinned, but could be looted. Given the loot was just crustacean meat, this was likely a simple placeholder that was never replaced for the actual lootable. Given the similarities and the fact that the audio for the river monster shares the same roars as the lion, this was either a scrap stranger mission, or hell, the lion mission may have replaced this one fully. While the only existing evidence of the river monster is strings of code in the back end, the game does give some clues in the way of cigarette cards the player can collect. Another scrapped animal that would appear was the camel animal that likely would have appeared in the same mission as the lion, in which Arthur would have to go out of his way to find what he believes to be a horse but is actually a camel or some shit. I don't know, this fucking shyster right here, you know what I'm saying? This camel had a corresponding cigarette card, which is ironic, which can be found nearby this mission, with 3 other cigarette cards in the game revealing what the river monster may have looked like. These 3 cards depict a large kraken-like creature, a large whale Moby Dick-like creature, and lastly a large Loch Ness monster, which many believe to be what the river monster would have been, as it's the only freshwater creature listed in these weird creature cigarette cards. Whatever the river monster was supposed to be, with the audio we have, this interaction would have been haunting. Hell, it's haunting just listening to it without the context in the game. Now imagine slowly rowing down the river and this just starts playing over the ambience. Would have been by far the creepiest thing in the game to me. Unused Animations may be tame in terms of cut content, but coming from a game like Team Fortress 2 where the characters and animations are already so lively, you got some goofy ass cut content to look through. Team Fortress 2 had a plethora of cut animations to most of their main characters. An animation set known as taunt_loot has animations for each one of the characters, while other characters have unique cut taunts like this one for Scout named Come and Get Me. Nah, I'm good, dude. I'll stay over here, you stay over there, yeah? There's a cutthroat engineer taunt that didn't make the cut, no pun intended. And some of these animations are clearly just early testing for models, like the jump_test animation that looks like the cast is partaking in a little pony play. If you don't know what that is, just don't worry about it, man. Better left unlooked up. An extra set of leaked assets and animations were found and uploaded to YouTube by Non a couple of years ago, where we could find pretty much the same stuff, except a few of these really catch your eye, like the last one featured here where the sniper really breaks something down right here. I don't know what he's breaking down, but it's broken down. But yeah, there isn't much more to find in these, but if you do want to see the animations in full, you could check out some of the videos on the screen here. Listen, I try to cover at least every entry that is on an iceberg, and sometimes there are errors by the author, and I believe this entry might be that case. I could be wrong, but I believe Mission 51 is the same as the final level in Metal Gear Solid 5, which we've covered in the first part. This mission is extensive, and thanks to it being released to the public, we see what the game's ending would have actually looked like. But again, the game's story is such a mess that even this ending is not very satisfying for fans. Considering all the bullshit that went on behind the scenes with this game, it's surprising there was much of a game left at all. Perhaps this entry is considering the many cutscenes that were shown in promos for the game but ended up being cut, or the infamous Mission 51, which we discussed in the first part. The only other thing this could be referencing is the cut and later found Chapter 3 title card that was called Peace, but many assume this is the title card that would have played after finishing Mission 51 without much actual game after just more story. There is also evidence left over in an actual boss fight with Skullface that would have gone hard, but instead this happened. You guys know how I feel about the big boss cutscene death. If you're gonna do that, at least let me press a button to do it. With all of this cut content surrounding the game and with the nostalgia of the game wearing off, it's becoming more and more of a husk of a game in my memory. A really fucking fun husk to play, but a husk nonetheless. Before there was Pokemon, there was Capsule Monsters. That's right, in its infancy, Pokemon wasn't even known as Pocket Monsters yet. Satoshi Tajiri brought this concept to Nintendo in the early 90s under the name of Capsule Monsters, taking inspirations from things like Ultraman, wherein they literally had a capsule kaiju, and the general Gashapon machines that were popular in Japan around that time. Nintendo really liked what they saw, and how could they not when you get your peepers on some of this concept art? It's immaculate just as art, but as a pitch, I mean, talk about an offer you can't refuse. However, to avoid copyright problems with the Ultraman series and other inspirations, Nintendo and Satoshi decided upon Pokemon, aka Pocket Monsters. The concept art actually came in a booklet of sorts that really went above and beyond. This is like when the teacher's pet starts doing a presentation in class. Fucking kiss ass. Here we could find surprisingly accurate and true to Final Form Pokemon drawn on sprite sheets. There are a few clear differences, like this drawing of an early Nidorino that took a different form from its final version, and overall there's a lot to see as far as Capsule Monsters and its concept art, both masterpieces and goofy ass doodles. So for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and move on. The Binding of Isaac is addicting, visually captivating while disturbing all at the same time, and a really unique take on the dungeon crawler genre. Given the amount of updates and content the game has received over the years, it's no surprise that there is a lot of cut content to look back on in the game. This entry focuses on the boss Hush, which in of itself is very disturbing, as it's a visual representation of suffocation, which, hey, I'd rather just fight a dragon or some shit, you know what I'm saying? Don't need to see all that, that's crazy. If that shit isn't wild enough, at one point in time there was going to be another phase, or second boss battle entirely with Hush, that would have featured his skinless form. I've reached my final form, I've shed my skin. Originally, the developer of the game, Edmund, stated that Skinless Hush was nothing more than a red herring for data miners to come across, a bait of sorts for data miners, you know. However, a bit later, some concept art came out confirming that at one point this phase of the Hush boss battle was being worked on for the game. Even though Skinless Hush is nothing more than a cut boss phase in the game's files, you can still access its sprite and spawn it in via the debug menu in Afterbirth Plus. But other than this, unless we get a further update, this is going to be the only way to fight this guy, and shit, maybe that's for the best, you know? Yikes. Much like other entries in this Iceberg, we are once again pulling from early concept art for this next one. This time we are looking at the Ace Attorney series, which over the years, with things like art books and developers' shared concepts, we have an idea of how different these characters were in their infancy. It's kind of strange to think of these iconic characters in different styles, especially when you look at Phoenix Wright, the face of the game. But like any iconic character, you gotta go through some stinkers before you end up on perfection. All things considered though, this isn't the worst I've ever seen, and still captures the essence of the art style of Ace Attorney. It just has a little bit less soul, I think, and it seems a bit more focused on the character's visual uniqueness and not really tying it to the world. Like, out of these two, which one screams lawyer prosecutor? Yeah, obviously Phoenix Wright. On the right, not his estranged cousin Eagle Wright. The same can be said for other characters' original designs, where you could see a lot of different variations, like this guy's hair, where they kept going back and forth on longer hair, bangs, and then settled on the slick back Magneto look. Overall, seeing as I haven't played a whole lot of the Ace Attorney series, I can't really speak on too many of these characters, just from what I know them as from what I've seen and played. But for fans of the series, these are going to be a lot of fun to look through, especially given that these characters in particular go through a lot of variations. So check it out. Go to Books A Million, get the Ace Attorney art book, or I don't know, get the PDF online. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Perhaps the biggest what could have been in gaming has to be the game Spore, man. Talk about some of the biggest promises and the most ambitious project you've ever seen type beat. Then you realize it's 2005 and you don't know if you're being lied to when watching this footage in front of your face. Is this game going to simulate biological evolution down to the very beginning with customization along the way, creating your own species of creature? Well, they got some of it down, right? I never delved super deep into Spore or its lore or anything or the backstory behind the game, but it's obvious the discussion around the game is it went to sell itself way too high and really underdelivered. Underdelivered up there with the ultimate undeliveries like Watch Dogs levels, bruh. You'll be calling up, asking them to come, I'll pay you to come get this back, bro. This presentation from 2005 at GDC shows Will Wright presenting a very early version of the game. Early but impressive. This built an extreme amount of hype around the game, similar to the hype and early buzz of No Man's Sky. A lot of fans who were disappointed with the final Spore game look back on this footage and see a game that they would have loved to play in its fullest version. And in this presentation, it seems to mostly promise that, but somewhere along the way, something happened, and it went from this to this. So in terms of unused content, I'd put this one under the category of not using the better game. And hey, that's not to say the final version of Spore doesn't have its fan base, and it's probably pretty good, and they probably prefer it the way it is. But it's worth noting that this version could have been the one that exists now. While on the subject of Spore, let's take a look at a specific stage known as the aquatic stage of life, which would have seen your creature evolve but underwater this time. You would evolve your fish by eating other fish in a pseudo feeding frenzy style minigame. There would be other creatures like amphibians and reptiles, and eventually you would be able to build underwater cities after evolving your creatures enough. Based on concept art, at some point you would be able to evolve enough to build submarines, which would help you explore underwater further. The most likely reason the stage went unused was the vast size it would have needed to contain an ocean versus the other stages, and worries over players getting lost in the ocean. The stage was shortly cut after Will Wright stated that it was on the verge of being cut in 2007. The aquatic stage would likely take place in between the cell and creature stages. It might have added a little bit more fluff to the front end of the game, but could have also added another unique gameplay segment overall. Given that the cell stage was a 2D swimming segment, I think the aquatic stage would have been a great way to evolve that from both literally in the game but also in a gameplay aspect by then taking the game into a 3D swimming space. Unfortunately, all we have left of the aquatic stage is this concept art for the fish and submarines, and on paper this sounds like it would have went pretty hard, you know, but in practice I guess it didn't work out. Seems ahead of its time, like Spore in and of itself, and a sentiment I've seen online a lot. A fully inspired, passionate, spiritual successor made with today's advancement in game development would be insane. It would just be really hard to trust given how many copycats came after and provided disappointing experiences in their final releases. So, fool me once, can't go fooled again. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, can't put the blame on me. Fool me 3 times, fuck the peace sign. Load the chopper, let it rain on you. The Forbidden 7 sounds like the saddest excuse as an answer from DC for Marvel's Sinister Six, but it's actually connected to the Super Smash Bros. Series, specifically Brawl. Super Smash Bros. Brawl, like other Smash games, was the height of character reveals, so any little bit of evidence that there were more characters hidden in the game, people snagged onto that like white on rice, brother. Little did we know Super Smash Bros. Brawl had evidence of 7 unique fighters in the game's files that proved that they were once planned to be in the game. These 7 fighters include 3 reoccurring characters from Melee, Dr. Mario, Mewtwo, and Roy, while there were 4 other brand new characters including Min and Pulse, Toon Sheik aka Tetra, and Toon Zelda, and fan favorite Dixie Kong. Before Ultimate brought everyone back to the party, the want for previous entries' characters was pretty real, and to see all these 7 characters almost make it into the game but not really hurts. But what hurts even more is the 4 new characters never made it into Smash Bros. At all, with one of the worst for me being Dixie Kong. Sure, most of these would likely just be Shadow Fighters or the Clone Fighters at this point, but I still think expanding each of these series' representations in the Smash games would be a good move. Since Brawl, the Forbidden 7 has become more like the Forbidden 57 with how many people still complain about that one character they want to see in Smash but never got. It's fun to imagine what your favorite character would look like in Smash Bros, so to have all these fellas almost make it into the game but not is heartbreaking. But alas, we always have the next Smash game. You guys think it's going to be good? You think they're going to change it up like they changed Mario Kart? You think that'll be a good thing or a bad thing? This Switch 2 has me fucking bonkers, dude. Bully represents school in a great light, that light being the shitty, horrible time most kids have in middle and high school. It's very realistic. Sure, the game likely hasn't aged in the writing department all that well, but overall they really nailed the feeling of you being on your own and looking out for your own in a fucking school. A large part of this was the addition of cliques, which are different groups of NPC students who belong to their own specific group. There are 6 total cliques in the final game, with them ranging from students who are nerds to greasers, whatever that is. I think it's John Travolta shit, you know what I'm saying? Original members of the bullies and townies were part of another clique known as the punks. This was supposedly cut very early into development, as most evidence of this clique comes from the concept art in a comic strip that came with a limited edition of the game. A couple of the characters featured in this art, like Zoe and Russell, are now leaders in their own respective cliques and have interactions with Jimmy throughout the game. The third character that was known to be part of the punk clique was known as Sid, who didn't make the cut into another clique and just showed up in the comic strip in this concept art. As far as evolutions for Russell and Zoe, this is cool to see how they were originally going to be small NPCs in a clique to more main characters in the story. And given how many cliques are already in the game, the addition of another, especially one as broad as punks, it seems a little bit excessive. I think they made the best decision in dividing the clique into the other groups and building on the characters they brought over from that. All I gotta say is rest in peace, Sid. Dear Diary, it's day 359 collectively talking about Yummer, the weird face from that online SpongeBob Flash game. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of these video game icebergs have a lot of crossover entries, so if you've seen one of my previous icebergs, chances are you've heard me talk about this big bald fuck right here before. If not, then welcome, sit on down. A Flash game known as SpongeBob Saves the Day, which is the title of another SpongeBob game, but this specific Flash game has a pretty creepy secret hanging out in the game's files. In the game's files, you can obviously find the normal sprite sheets for the game, along with a sprite of this bald homie right here. He looks equally goofy and terrifying, but as time passes, I come to light up whenever I see Yummer again. Don't get me wrong, a piece of my soul leaves every time I have to explain this little secret, but I'm no longer creeped out by the homie. He's my little Caillou bald fuck friend. Check him out, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, he's just kind of chilling in the sprite sheet and was clearly being used as a placeholder that was accidentally left in the sprite sheet for the Krusty Krab screen. This was likely used as a comedic and very obvious way for developers to recognize this this as a placeholder to replace it with an actual character from the game. Typical game dev shit. The setup for this always makes it seem like there would be a lot more to a mystery to this one, given how random the game is and how creepy the picture is at first sight. But yeah, no, this one is pretty open shut case of a weird placeholder. Pikmin 3 was a great relaunch of the series while also introducing brand new features, the most risky of all, new main characters. You end up playing as 3 new explorers in Pikmin 3, even though you do run into Olimar later in the game. It's still a risky move to restart with a brand new cast of main characters. However, like GTA 5, having 3 characters to control in this game really helped keep things fresh and have unique gameplay sequences that are unique to this game. During the reveal of Pikmin 3 at E3 2012, a crew of 4 space cadets were seen, with each one being denoted with a letter. Of course, if you played Pikmin 3, 3 of these 4 characters look super familiar. Character D here was never used and ended up being cut from the game, while the other 3 would turn out to be Alf, Brittany, and Charlie. There are many theories surrounding what happened to character D, both in literal development sense and in the game's lore sense. As far as why he was cut, it's speculated that he was transformed into the SS Drake, given that they both start with the letter D, leaving the player to control 3 characters, leaving the 4th instruments as the spaceship they use. Pretty fucked up. This would also end up causing people to mistaken character D to be Alf's granddad, who Alf named his spaceship after, but alas, there is no more evidence of character D beyond this concept art and some wild-ass theories online. But honestly, the thought that he's the one scanning all your random fruit in for the whole game, yikes, what the hell? There are theories that character D did actually exist in the Pikmin universe but was killed during the crash, or even crash landed before the main crew arrived. Much like the rescues you perform in Pikmin 4, this is a common occurrence for the Pikmin universe. I mean, it pretty much starts out all the games. You crash land. So I could low-key buy the fact that one of these crashes didn't end up so well. Rest in peace, character D. You look like a shitty fan art of fucking Ferb from Phineas and Ferb. Around the time Minecraft was planning to add in villagers into the game, they were going to have a completely different gem that would have been tradable with the villagers instead of the emeralds in the final game. Originally, the gem would have been a ruby, and basically up until the 1.3.1 Java edition update, rubies were ready to go. These were quickly scrapped and replaced by emeralds, leaving the ruby to have never officially been in the game, even though it was pretty much done and really close to being included. The main reason behind this change was due to the developer Dinnerbone, who has red-green color blindness, making it hard to decipher between this and redstone. Not only would this overall help Dinnerbone's development process, but it helped others with this form of color blindness play Minecraft. Not to mention, before the emerald, there was no other green ore to find in the mines. Meanwhile, ruby and redstone, even without any form of color blindness, would be hard to decipher in the mines when it's dark enough. So I think this change was necessary, at least for the developers to feel comfortable working with these ores. Plus, who doesn't love running across a nice lick with a villager to run your emeralds up? Nothing like seeing that green go up, you know what I'm saying? In real life and in Minecraft. Not to say that rubies wouldn't have the exact same effect as the emerald, as it's an exact copy of the ruby, at least in terms of use and purpose. The ruby did come back for a short bit as a unique currency in Minecraft Earth before that shit the bed. But considering it's Minecraft, there's probably a shit ton of mods out there that add in the ruby as an ore you can use for tools and other shit. So all things considered, this isn't the biggest L in terms of cut content. Portal 2 introduced a lot of new gameplay mechanics to keep the puzzles interesting and give a reason Portal needed a sequel. They may have been a little bit too ambitious, at least in terms of changing gameplay. There are several gels in the game that give players an extra boost or a jump if used. Each gel gives a different result to the player, and one that never made it into the game was the purple Adhesion Gel. This would have allowed wherever the gel was sprayed, the player could stick to it, and as a result, the player could walk on walls and even ceilings. On paper, this sounds like it would help change up the game for the better. Getting new perspective on puzzles and laying your portals in areas maybe you couldn't see before. But the ending result was disoriented play testers and a feature that wasn't fully functional with the portals, which given the name of the game, it's no wonder they cut this gel. The gel remains in the game's files and was even updated upon in the peer review DLC, wherein it was changed to Reflection Gel. Similarly to the Adhesion Gel, the Reflection Gel also didn't make it into the DLC's final release, even though it functioned completely different from the Adhesion Gel. The Reflection Gel would bounce lasers off of it, similar to the mirror boxes, but a larger surface area. Since both of these gels exist in the game's files, many fans have attempted to make the Adhesion Gel work with varying results. The Adhesion Gel may have been ahead of its time, but I wouldn't be mad if they kept playing with this idea. It feels like I'm just bitching about wanting new games. But if we ever get a Portal 3, this would be interesting to see if they were able to make it work. Manhunt is the darkest Rockstar series and makes the people complaining that Grand Theft Auto is too violent. It makes them look like buffoons. The series only ever got 2 entries, and in both games the objective was the same: gruesomely kill people for one reason or another. The first Manhunt game had a slew of cut characters, most popular being that of Scarecrow, and no, not this dude, but pretty much this dude. He was originally meant to be the leader of the Smileys group, but after a run-in with Pigsy, he was then exiled from the group and joined the Tramp group. The only evidence of Scarecrow are these character sheet concept art images where it gives a little bit more background of the character. For example, Scarecrow's main weapon is a large axe he carries around with him. And he dresses up more, I guess, on Halloween with a jack-o'-lantern on his head. Overall, design-wise, Scarecrow was super intriguing for this world. And yeah, maybe he shares too many characteristics with the DC Scarecrow, but given mods and the concept art we have, I can't say this guy wouldn't fit perfectly in this world. Plus the intriguing backstory to do with Pigsy, it's a shame this idea went unused. For me, looking at a game like the first Dark Souls, less is more in terms of bosses. That's just from me being a noob. But man, one more giant guy with a sword would have made me want to... However, for more seasoned players, the idea of an extra boss is tantalizing to say the least. Dark Souls 1 has a cut boss known as the Undead King Ja-Yearl. Yeah, I'm sure I'm not saying that shit right. I'm sure that was botched. The Undead King, not unlike other bosses in this world and series, is an oversized king of sorts who is clearly dead with crazy armor and a crazy aura about him. This guy's aura points are through the roof. The strangest part of his whole look is he's a king with no crown. So what kind of king is that? No king of mine. The Undead King has not only his model present in the game's files, but data miners also discovered Ja-Yearl's moveset, which was a slightly modified version of Old King Allant from Demon's Souls. With all of this evidence, it is possible to mod the game to include Ja-Yearl back into the game where he looks like he fits perfectly into the world. Given that there is no clear area for this boss to be in the game, fans have assumed his boss fight would have been in the New Londo ruins underneath the Firelink Shrine. Not only does Ja-Yearl straight up jack Old King Allant's moveset, but also his voice, which honestly it fits pretty perfectly for an undead king. Take a listen. Even more terrifying, his secondary attack with his dark hand could steal players' soul levels, so this guy would have been a menace. And despite his dope-ass design, I'd still rather play through Blighttown 3 times in a row than try this guy out, you know what I'm saying? If there was a series that I would like to come back, it'd be the mainline Arkham series. If you're familiar with the channel, you know sometimes I can't stop talking about this series. I have a problem. Even though there were 4 games and each featured a number of Batman's iconic villains, there were still many more that deserved their own small stories or side missions. One of the iconic villains that was being referenced throughout the earlier Arkham games also made it into Arkham Knight, but was ultimately cut out of the game pretty early on. I'm not super familiar with Prometheus as a Batman villain, but from what the game references, he is basically the opposite of Batman in every way. His parents were criminals who were killed by cops, pushing him to a life of a vigilante with hatred for the police force. With this idea and lead up to Arkham Knight and the secret identity of the Knight, chances were if this wasn't Prometheus, he probably wasn't going to be in the game. Arkham Knight, or as we find out later is the Red Hood, is already a vigilante version of Batman, and having 2 of these guys just really wouldn't work out, and is likely the reason they didn't go ahead with including him. There are files present in the Season of Infamy DLC for Prometheus where it seems like he was planned to join the other villains featured in this DLC set. However, due to nothing more in the series than a small references, there was no through-line story with Prometheus, and compared to the other villains who did make it into the DLC, you can kind of see why. The villains in this DLC all were featured in previous games and made an appearance in one way or another, and this was used to wrap their stories up. And to add in a brand new villain to the universe in the final DLC for the final game in the series, at least for now, is likely something developers would have wanted to avoid. Due to there not being much more than this small reference to Prometheus and Knight's files, there really isn't much more to look at here. It's clear Rocksteady wanted to play around with the idea of adding Prometheus into the series, but again, even though 4 games sounds like a lot of room to play around with many cool Batman villains, it still seems they ran out of time to get some of Batman's more obscure villains their time in the limelight. It's unfortunate, but I haven't totally lost hope because of games like Batman Arkham VR, where they feature the villain Ratman, so it's not impossible we get a new Arkham someday and finally get that badass Batman Prometheus battle we all wanted. Like much of Minecraft's other cut content, the potion making at some point looked very different and a bit deeper than the final version's potion making. Initially, potion making would have been used with a cauldron rather than a brewing stand, and with this was speculation that you'd be able to combine a lot more ingredients than with the brewing stand. This is further backed up by around 30 potions that went unused and subsequently were removed from Minecraft pretty early on. The potions each have individual names and seem to be the result of trial and error with making potions in the cauldron. In a modern day Minecraft, there are about half of these potions to make, with each one having a specific purpose. Therefore, there is no benefit to trying out random recipes, which is what the cut style of potion making seems to focus on more. A lot of these cut potions don't seem to directly assist the player like a lot of the game's potions do now. Things like the odorless and bungling potion are potions that I have no idea how they would have assisted in any gameplay elements of Minecraft. Given how many cut potions there are, my best guess is these were random outputs for trying random recipes in the cauldron, leading to half of these not doing anything or very little for the player. But I don't know, would you guys like to see more potions added in the future? And at that point, even if they didn't fully buff the player, or hell, even benefit them at all, I think they could get creative with the new potions, but at the same time, you could quickly start making Minecraft Harry Potter if the potions get too goofy, you know what I'm saying? If there's one thing you gotta know about Doki Doki Literature Club, is spoilers ahead. The game is a visual novel that takes unexpected turns and ends with the death of a fan favorite character, Yuri. I bring this up because the next entry may reveal more about what they had planned for Yuri post-mortem. In the game's files, we can find unused expressions for both Yuri and Natsuki. Natsuki can be seen turning away, and this is thought to have been used when she was offended by one of the other characters in the game. Natsuki's files actually don't exist in the game's backend anymore, as the only ones that remain are Yuri's 2 unused expressions. The first one shows a shocked and or offended Yuri, while the second one shows a much more friendly version of Yuri. However, if you've played the game, you'll know that when Yuri meets her demise, we see her pupils expanded like in this cut expression. I don't fully know what this implies, and seeing as I've never played through the game fully myself, I assume this is an odd piece of cut content given what happened to Yuri. In the final game, her expression when she meets her demise isn't one of horror, sure, but it's still somber and reserved. If replaced with this cut expression, I think it would make the scene creepier and hell, maybe even less impactful, who knows. But what do you guys who've played the game think of this? Do you think this expression went unused from Yuri's demise, or were they planning on something else entirely from the character after this happens? Let me know about that one in the comments. As stated in the last episode, and I think even earlier in this episode, when we covered Sonic the Hedgehog's beta version, Sonic looked much different than what we know it as now. This of course includes the first level, Green Hill Zone, which features a different layout, but notably there are these large checkered balls that can be found in the beginning of the level. I believe I mentioned this in the first part of the Iceberg, the first video, but Sonic can ride these balls for whatever reason, and they are used to as obstacles to chase them and maybe squish them if you're bad enough. Besides these things being reused for things like the wrecking ball obstacle, the purpose of these large balls is unknown. This likely goes back to the fact that Sonic was more of a slower platforming game made to compete with Mario. That was until it got its identity for its faster paced gameplay. Perhaps these checkered balls would have acted more as mobile platforms for Sonic to jump off of, but again, without much more information about the purpose of these balls, there isn't much more I can do than just speculate. These could be Mr. Robotnik's testicles for all I fucking know, so before this gets weirder, let's go ahead and move on. Fortnite is one of those games that constantly has content in and out of rotations, so nailing down something that is actually cut from the game permanently isn't easy. Hell, this entry probably won't age well when they pull a Smash Bros. Ultimate and do a Fortnite All Seasons Are Here or some shit, where they add everything ever that was ever in the game. because it's Fortnite and they're constantly trying to hemorrhage that ever declining player base. But for now, this entry takes us to an unused mine of sorts that players would be able to troll players with in the Battle Royale mode. The item is known as the Beehive Grenade and would have been a throwable that would have done 15 damage every second to enemy players that were in range of the thrown beehive. This is actually a similar concept to an enemy known as the Beehive Lobber from the PvE Save the World mode. Yeah, remember that? As far as the impact this item would have for the game, I couldn't say. I think this would have been more of a nuisance item than an actual strategic item to kill players, but what do I know? I'm not fucking Ninja. I've never played Yume or its unofficial fan sequel, Yume, so you'll have to bear with me. But from what I've gathered is Yume is a spiritual successor in a way to Yume that not only serves as its sequel, but almost an endless game if you're a fan of this game. This is because of the absolute absurd amount of worlds this game has. I mean, you can see here that the list just keeps going. It just keeps going. In this large list of levels, and since the game technically never had a final full release, there is going to be quite a few stages that were in the game at one point but were removed for several reasons. There are too many removed maps here to go into each one and why it was removed, but to just highlight a few that caught my eye, here are some of the following. The TV Labyrinth level was removed in the 0.112i version and featured a stage filled with old staticky TVs that make up the platforms you walk on. Apart from being a liminal nightmare, the level appears to be a maze, so maybe it's a good thing this one got vaulted. Even with how complicated this appears, it still served as a hub world of sorts connecting 4 other levels, which is insane. Another notable removed map was the Pokemon world, where the map would reference and pay homage to the GBA Pokemon games in visuals and gameplay. Given that Yume is already an RPG, this was a match made in heaven, but for whatever reason this was removed in newer versions of the game. Perhaps because Nintendo is scary, I don't know. If you'd like to explore all of the maps from Yume, you can check out the Yume wiki. Jesus, that's a fucking mouthful right there. I've never been a big Bejeweled guy. I was always more of a Zuma guy, but that's just me. Bejeweled Twist was the first spin-off title in the series and changed the gameplay, so instead of a swap to typical puzzle game, you now rotate the pieces to match. Yeah, it doesn't sound like that much of an innovation on the game of Bejeweled, but developers mentioned in interviews that they were striving to bring more special gems to the game, both that positively and negatively affect the player. Of these special gems, some went unused, although are still present in the game's files. Of these gems, there is one that seems a little bit too overpowered for its own good. This is known as the Angel Gem and was going to be one of the rarest gems to get in the game and would have removed all of the bad gems on the screen when achieving a match with 5 other gems. While this gem is still present in the game's files, attempts to bring it back into the game will result in the game crashing as there was no programming done to it before it was removed. Considering this would have been hard to get, it probably wouldn't have been super overpowered, but still, anything that clears your board in a puzzle game is equally satisfying and a little patronizing at the same time. To round out today's video, we'll be touching on the worst kind of cut content. Content that used to be available in a game but is no longer due to it being digital products that don't get its rights renewed for various reasons, leaving the things to die in the digital ether. This is what happens often with movie tie-in video games. It's why you don't see a lot of licensed games come back, at least without jumping through some major hoops. This unfortunately happened to Payday 2, where the Tony Montana Scarface DLC was taken down from all digital storefronts. This means without a disc with the DLC unlocked on the disc, then the DLC is impossible to get naturally unless you have already owned it. It's unknown as to the exact reason, but many assume that Overkill either couldn't afford to renew the license or had no interest as they started pushing assets to Payday 3. See where that got you guys. Fucking what the fuck was that? Licensed content like this can be really cool and honestly fine if it's a physical thing you have access to at all times, but when it comes to things like DLC being taken down, it becomes one of the worst parts of the gaming industry. Alright, that'll do it for today's episode. Again, I wanted to keep this video to 1 layer to give each entry their fair shake. I hope this will continue to improve my videos, and I hope it's not that big of a change for you guys. Anyway, with this new style, it shouldn't take quite as long for the next layer to come out, and if you'd like to stay updated for that, make sure to subscribe down below. If you like the video, make sure to drop a like as well and leave a comment. Let's discuss some cut content down below, you know what I'm saying? Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode soon. Peace.